Today on Flavors and Knowledge, the truth about pasta. Hello, friends. Welcome back to our Food Learning Podcast, where we strive for honest food talk and few opinions. I'm your host, Chef Walter, and recently I stumbled upon a TV program where a guest falsely accused pasta and other starches of turning us into blimpy humans. And so often these self-proclaimed experts either have a signed contract for the next cookbook, probably based solely on their immeasurable hunger for profits, and probably only cook on weekends for family and friends. And so let me share what I think, not based on simple perception, but on evidential time spent cooking thousands of pasta dishes, spent throughout a 50-year career behind hot, sweaty, and rowdy kitchens for thousands of different palates. Exactly, yes, that has been my career. And consuming a first course based on starch is typically Italian, as you know, and it isn't easy to find an incomparable variety of flavors and ingredients in other countries. Abroad, pasta or rice are usually presented with lean recipes as small portions together with the second course. And for example, meat and vegetable dishes often pair well with rice in Greek tradition, replaced by couscous if you dine in Morocco or areas in northern Africa. Many questions revolve around pasta, cereals, and derivatives in general, and in this podcast I will try to answer clearly and exhaustively. The first question concerns many. Does pasta make us fat? The opinion is increasingly widespread that pasta is the cause of overweight, but there is nothing more erroneous. The cause of this false belief is the disclosure of crazy diets, or instead, it is the diet industry that sells tons of books on the subject every year. These diets usually offer a low intake of carbs, which turns into insufficient quantity of cereals, derivatives, tubers, and legumes. Effectively, these diets work in the short term, perhaps a few months. But once we analyze the results in the medium to long term, perhaps 1 to 3 years, they cause an overall worsening of eating behavior. Restricting excessively the intake of carbs for an extended period goes against the basic notion of nature. Humans derive the energy to live from these substances, and under penalty of altering the metabolism and eating behavior, that becomes impulsive and compulsive. In addition, caloric restriction can increase the sensitivity of something called dopaminergic. That is a gratification circuit that is present in our brains, activated by substances of behaviors that cause addiction. In obesity, it is precisely the food that is addictive. Therefore, food restrictiveness toward dishes such as first course may persist in such people. In contrast, food impulsiveness increases the consumption of immediately available and energy-dense foods, such as sweets and savory snacks, ice cream, etc. The sales figures for sweet snacks, mainly those with chocolate, they have been showing an increase in sales and consumption. And this is probably also due to their low cost, which is accessible to everybody pretty much. The food industry is in some ways responsible for the rampant rise in obesity, but this is just my guess, based on experience. Consuming the first course based on pasta or cereal, or replacing it with bread in the right quantity is part of a balanced diet. In addition, the starches may help with the long-lasting energy. And so the question is it better pasta or the rice out of the two carbs? Pasta and rice are the two main ingredients of first courses in Italy, which usually followed by ravioli, tortellini, gnocchi, spelt, and barley, and who has more puts more. Right is the lighter version than pasta, and we seem to think that in reality the term lightness can be confusing. Rice and pasta have a completely overlapping calorie content. Rice is on average more digestible than pasta, as the starch molecular structure is faster to digest and also does not contain gluten. This feature can be interesting, but remember that a more incredible speed of digestion and absorption will result in a greater glycemic index. Having a higher glycemic index means detecting more rapid increases in blood sugar that may cause hormonal changes, forcing us to eat again. And conversely, consuming foods with a low glycemic index is recommended to everyone, particularly people with diabetes or a risk of developing alteration in carbohydrates metabolism and having shown exciting results in containing overweight. The next question that everybody will ask is pasta a carbohydrate? To simplify communications in the nutritional field, sometimes one runs into simplistic and imprecise messages, such as that pasta is rich only in carbohydrates, which is another mistake and another complete belief. It is in fact sufficient to read the nutritional label on the packaging to discover that the pasta contains 12 to 14% protein, which of course is not negligible. But let's compare the protein intake of a medium portion of pasta, about 80 grams, which equals to 2.82 ounces, and a steak to understand their extent a little bit better. Pasta has 10 grams of protein. A steak will have 20 grams of protein or similar amount in weight. The rest is in the digestive spectrum. That is where all the difference lies. We can digest an appropriate portion of pasta with a lighter sauce in about 2 hours. In contrast, a portion of meat with identical protein content will remain in our intestine for 2 to 3 weeks, coating the tracking system with unwanted and excessive animal fat, which will in exchange turn into the lovely cholesterol. And of course, the proteins of the pasta are of low biological value, but combined with some proteins of the legumes, they will make up an excellent vegetarian and complete dish, comparable, nutritionally speaking, to a steak. What is the correct portion and which recipe to prefer? Those who follow perhaps my newsletter, which is called Flavors and Knowledge, know that the best portion is the one that respects the sense of hunger in subjective society, which varies according to energy expenditure, age, work, sex, etc. Instead, we can consider 80 grams as an intermediate portion for anyone, regardless of age and weight, to give us a standard quantity. But you might ask how much depends on the actual sauce that accompanies the pasta. Blaming pasta or other starchy food in general for being overweight is an understatement. But you have to think about sauces in this context. The habits can increase the energy density of the first courses, mainly concern the preparation of sauces. And let me just show you some examples. Even sauces considered light, as the basil pesto, are loaded with a high energy density because it contains olive oil, pine nuts, and cheese, and we must add them in light moderation. And although adding cheese to the sauce increases its energy density, the traditional teaspoon of Parmigiano is acceptable. but a mountain of Parmigiano is of course excessive. Furthermore, we ought to carefully check the amount of oil used as a base for the sauté. In addition to the unhealthy chemical modification induced by the heat, the cooking oil is rather indigestible, and so choosing a good quality extra virgin olive oil, it's a must. In conclusion, dear friends, every sauce contains a determined amount of fats. Therefore, the term moderation rules and has been ruling the world of food in every aspect. And that is all for this episode of Flavors and Knowledge and the Truth About Pasta. I hope you found it interesting. Please follow this podcast on Anchor.fm or any of your preferred platforms, and I will add all the pertinent information on the show notes regarding our travel business, cooking school, and much more. If you are in a kitchen today or tonight, always keep your eyes on the fire, choose food wisely, about 80 grams of pasta if you can, and we'll reconnect on the next round with another interesting food talk. And I promise you,